Okay, Dave, great to have this conversation today. I'm looking forward to it. And I might just do a quick introduction of yourself and myself, if that's okay, Dave. So, Dave Phung, Chief Disruptor at GPT Strategic. Dave, do you want to just give us a quick summary of what GPT Strategic does?
Yeah, we're a generative AI development studio. We build bots. We build them on the Microsoft framework. Unapologetically hitched ourselves to the Microsoft stack for various reasons. One of which is its dominance in the enterprise space, which is where our clients more often than not reside.
Great. And you've got a great resume here. I mean, you've done, if I go through it, you've worked with GE, you've got design thinking experience across a number of companies over the last 20 years. PlayStation, you launched PlayStation, the store in London, is that right?
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was a transformative project from Sony's perspective. It was at a time when Sony Movies was experiencing a lot of challenges when when streaming services were invented, and gaming was one of their prominent projects in that era in terms of transforming revenues, transforming and delivering new models of business. So that was an exciting time for the company, and it launched a whole suite of different and very profitable projects up even to this day. So it was a good time.
Fantastic. Very exciting. And you spent 9 years at Pactera, where you really honed your design thinking skills over a 10-year tenure, and you also are a founder of a startup back in the pre-pandemic days. So you've got a really amazing resume. And today we're going to be talking and having a conversation about generative AI and the opportunity for businesses worldwide to really capitalize on this emergent technology. We don't need to say a lot about what's already been said, but you and the team at GPT Strategic very much zero in on guiding businesses through this journey and getting solutions designed and built for them. My first question would be, I guess, if you could just give us a brief overview of what Gen AI is, because AI is a fairly broad spectrum. How is generative AI distinct from other AI technologies?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good jumping off point. I mean, AI at the best of times is a pretty ambiguous label, right? It's a label that's applied to kind of anything that looks and feels like machine generated or machine enabled decision making, right? Autopilot systems in aeroplanes, it takes inputs including weather forecast, destination, height, speed, as in altitude, and so forth, to manage and control the hydraulic and mechanical systems that guide the plane to its destination. Right, that's a type of AI. Generative AI, by contrast, is really about using models that have been trained on vast amounts of data to generate content. That content could be video, it could be imagery, it could be, and more often, the most common use case is text. So that's generative AI, as the descriptor would be very much alluding you to.
And so it leads me to the question around the opportunity for businesses, because we've seen, the enormous impact ChatGPT's already had, and then you've got Microsoft who've invested 10 billion. Let me get that right. In OpenAI, have a partnership with them. They have their Azure OpenAI services now. The custom language model, so the small language model for businesses, what are the benefits for a business in setting up one of those? So, for want of a better term, a private GPT, ChatGPT model. What are the benefits Is it just creating another little toy for the business to play around with, or is it something more than that?
It's probably worth unpacking a little bit of that. So a language model is essentially the brain that powers the GPT, right? The language model is trained on, in Chat GPT's case, it's trained on the internet. Everything that's publicly available, it was trained on. I believe it's now being battled out in the courts as to what the next release of ChatGPT can be trained on and what it needs to be excluding. That's a whole nother can of worms. The value of a business investing in a small language model is essentially being able to capture the IP or the intellectual property that is presumably your business's competitive advantage, and being able to algorithmically and systematically leverage that for all members of the organization. The example I could give you is, we have a client who's a surgeon with many years of experience, who are helping him with digitizing decades of case notes and summary notes and surgical sort of information to essentially train a model that can help the next generation of surgery students that might present different symptoms, that's able to provide an interface for students to query and learn from decades of experience, all encapsulated within this small language model. So that would be the value of a language model built for the purpose of the enterprise. You could also control its tone, brand identity, and any other, I guess, aspect of the business that needs to be, I guess, configured before it was customer facing.
Yeah, and I imagine the benefits of having your own IP secured around a firewall type situation. And I imagine this is what Azure OpenAI Services presents, in that Microsoft's got this incredible background in supplying enterprise technology, and their security is widely renowned. Is it something that companies, I sort of liken it to the intranet versus the internet, and the internet is traditionally been this, for want of a better term, a bit of a dumping ground for all of a company's policies and documents and things like that.
Yep.
This seems to be something even more dynamic than that, in that it can ingest all of that wonderful IP, and it sits securely in a platform like Azure OpenAI's AI services in the company's own small language model. Is that a reality now, or is that something that is a way off?
I mean, this is one of the primary reasons for us, I guess, selecting Microsoft as our technology partner. To extend on the ChatGPT example, right? That's the public domain in the sense that the language model has been trained on the public internet, whereas a private model would only and would be exclusively trained on and held within your Azure instance, a private language model that is not available to the public. That's readily available as of today.
Yeah. I have spoken to a number of people from various organizations, some in very sensitive IP environments, so like healthcare and things like that. I think one of their concerns is that staff, and we've seen this in some fairly high profile examples in the media, where employees have uploaded some pretty sensitive IP into the public ChatGPT. How dangerous is that for a company to have employees using ChatGPT? Is that something that they can delete, or is it lost forever in the public domain?
Yeah, that's a really really good question. And I mean, I think there's an inherent part of emerging technology where people simply don't understand it in terms of how it's used, where the data that they enter goes, how that data is used thereafter, what rights they have to it, and so on and so forth. So I would say, as a general comment, user beware, right? It's worth having a skim through the terms and conditions. We've seen over the past few months that there are a number of examples of sensitive and commercially sensitive data being entered into ChatGPT. So it's not likely that someone's going to be able to retrieve that data verbatim. However, one of the T's and C's, one of the line items in the very long version of the T's and C's for ChatGPT states that data input can be used to train the next model. So conceivably, a competitor, for example, could prompt ChatGPT to retrieve that data. It may not be verbatim, and it may not be exactly as it was input. However, that is a risk, right? And it goes to your earlier point. What's the value of a private language model? That's the value there. It's captured within your secure environment behind your firewall, not to be used for training of subsequent GPT models.
So Dave, GPT Strategic works with a number of different types of organizations to work towards setting up their own small language model in that environment. Can you just share the high level process you go through with the clients when they're expressing interest in leveraging Gen AI? What's your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we adopt a design thinking led approach to guiding customers along that generative AI journey. We start with immersing ourselves in your business, understanding your goals, your motivations, your aspirations. Then and only then can we really form a full picture of what success looks like, what good looks like, what done looks like. From there, we would share a bit about what the technology is capable of, and what it can do, what it's good at, and what's possible from a technology perspective. Then we'll explore and ideate around different use cases. And we like to bring in a broad cross section of the organization, everyone from finance to risk to accounting to operations and so on and so forth, to really get a real a broad view of how the business model works, how work happens in an organization. And then once we have that, I guess, conversation around where those use cases might exist, we'll start to prioritize and look for those high impact, low effort, look for those high impact, low effort use cases to start to prototype. And it's a very, we have a simple process to get from idea to launch in a 6 to 8 week period. So we like to be idea led rather than technology led. And sort of counterintuitively, it's not really a technology conversation at the onset. It's really about the business model, the pain points that exist across different business lines. And for us, deeply understanding that is really the first step in that journey to, I guess, crafting a generative AI roadmap for your organization. The more, I guess, the typical starting point is productivity. We want to, something along the lines of, we want to reduce overhead of low value tasks. So automate that with generative AI. That's a very common starting point, but I often encourage clients to think a bit bigger than that. It has the potential, the technology has the potential to transform business models, to create completely new businesses that might coexist alongside your current business model. So it's, a lot of people, and you often hear it's limited only by an imagination, which is true as it may be. It still requires a facilitated and a concerted process to step through that in a methodical manner to derive use cases for us to prototype. That's how we work.
Yeah, it seems like a fairly smart way to go about it. I think anything that begins with design, uh, always works its way through a time of deeper thinking about what is actually trying to be achieved, and you have that opportunity rather than just going in and going, oh wow, I can just build this because I have all the capabilities to do something, and you post rationalize the outcome. Um, which leads me to ask, how do you measure this kind of AI and its effectiveness? Like, are there specific ROI benchmarks or KPIs that your clients consider when measuring the effectiveness of these Gen AI activities?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. From the point of view of, you know, what good looks like, it's going to be different for every organization, right? There's no two businesses that are identical, perfectly identical. So there is merit in exploring success criteria and applying that success criteria and holding it up against each use case to determine, okay, is this the right use case for us to prototype or to build out or to explore further, or is it not? Typically organizations will come to me with something along the lines of, we want to increase revenue, we want to reduce cost, or we want to reduce risk, right? And it's a combination of one or more of those, themes. And it's a good way to start. It's a good way to start fleshing out your success criteria. More, it's organizations that have gone further in their thinking would come to me with something like, we want to increase our competitive advantage over insert competitor name, right? And how you do that is it's one of those how long's a piece of string questions, right? But starting with and agreeing upon internally within your organization what good looks like through success criteria is a really valuable starting point, because otherwise it's just another person with an opinion, right?
Yeah.
I would, we can facilitate that conversation through the workshops as well, and we often do, to ensure that we have an aligned view on where we're steering the ship, so to speak.
Yeah, right. No, that makes sense. And tell me, with I'm just thinking about the fact that there's been so much noise in the media, so many gurus appearing who are suddenly experts in Gen AI. And there's a lot of information now that's saturating, every channel you can imagine. And I can understand how, businesses and leaders of businesses would think, there's just too much going on here, too much noise. Let's just sit and wait. The other side of the coin there is that this generative AI technology in the spectrum of AI seems to be a real tsunami in terms of disruption. And I am going to ask, the question that gets asked all the time, because I'd love to hear your opinion on it. But the first part of my question will be, what's the danger of just sitting back and waiting? Are there pros and cons in that?
For me, and having had the opportunity to speak to many dozens of clients over the past several months, I've concluded that inaction isn't an option. Actually, inaction is not an option, because generative AI as an emerging technology, it exists in dog years. It moves so fast. Right? What is not possible today will be possible in 2 weeks' time, thereabouts, and it's fast evolving. And if you're in a competitive space and your brand matters, then you need to start thinking about your generative AI narrative. You need to start thinking about how to start. You need to start thinking about what's that first stepping stone or building block I need to lay down so that we set up for long-term success, right? Your competitors are probably doing it. And if you're a listed company and you don't have a generative AI storyline, and I was reading the annual report, I'd be pretty nervous, right? I'd be pretty nervous. Ignoring it won't make it go away, right? This is probably the most significant technology change of our generation, arguably, right? and to ignore it would be dangerous to ignore it, is the short version. But also, there's also a lot of merit in the old adage of, think big and start small. Like, we don't have to change the whole business today. What I encourage clients to do is to adopt a mindset of experimentation, is to incrementally deploy things to prove value to the business, to put people at ease, to show that in amongst the noise, in amongst the hype, there are real world applications that can deliver tangible business benefits within a short period of time. And having, I guess, a mindset of pragmatism and experimentation is going to move the needle far greater and far faster than simply waiting around for something to happen, right? I mean, if you're not disrupting, you're probably going to be disrupted, right? Is probably how I'd answer that one.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I'm kind of what I'm getting from that is that 6 months delay with this type of emergent technology, well, very disruptive technology, not even emergent now, it's here, it's very powerful, it's
Yep.
as you said, it's just gathering steam by the day, by the minute. I imagine 6 months delay is a very different 6 months delay and saying, oh, we'll just put off installing the next, latest greatest CRM tech in the business. And the competitive advantage of those who are thinking about it now, as you mentioned before, the design thinking approach and getting their thoughts around their business and things like that is a far better position to be in, even if you haven't actually created a solution yet. You're thinking about it, you're considering its implications. I think that's obviously a good place to start. It does lead me to the second part of my question, which has been asked a lot, and I do want to ask you this. I think a lot of knowledge workers, whether they admit it or not, are concerned about generative AI right across the board. So designers, writers, we've seen the writers' strike in the US, which has gathered a lot of PR around that. What's your take on that? Are we being replaced as knowledge workers? Is there an opportunity? Are we being reduced? What are your thoughts and maybe you can reflect on some of the companies you work with and how they're thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and it's a fascinating topic because by and large, everyone that we work with is a knowledge worker, and whether or not they readily acknowledge it or publicly acknowledge the disruptive potential of generative AI is a whole nother thing. The way I see it, and if you zoom out and look at the arc of human history, right? When the written word was invented, commentators of the day were probably, I wasn't there, but probably up in arms about our ability to remember and tell stories, right? When, fast forwarding a little bit now, when the printing press was invented, scholars of the day were up in arms about our ability to write, to be grammatically and punctuation correct in our written communication. And if you fast forward a little bit further, word processing was invented, and then commentators of the day were up in arms about our ability to I guess construct written sentences. Then if you look at it, generative AI through that lens, then it simply becomes the next chapter in the story of the evolution of humans and technology, right? It's just the next chapter, and whether or not you choose to embrace or reject it, it's on you. But it's not going to go away. It is the most significant technological change of this generation, and it will come with a period of discomfort. It will impose an adjustment period for many knowledge workers, and ultimately the the rate of productivity more than likely be increased. However, what remains constant in amongst all of that technological change is human ingenuity and human imagination. That's what generative AI cannot do. It cannot imagine something, right? And for me, it's, as of today, it's an accelerator to our imagination, and it's an accelerator or a propellant to human creativity, right? And to see it in another way is really just to deny technology, and to deny technology is to deny a part of being human, right? From the very first time we clanged two rocks together to create heat, to generative AI, that's a lot. That exists along a storyline of humans evolving alongside and together with technology. That's as a lover of disruption, that's the only way I can see it, right? And
Yeah.
it'll create in some situations, it'll create chaos. It will, but you could ignore it, or you can choose to harness its power, harness its potential, and deploy it in a way that's going to move you forward, move your business forward, move your organization forward overall. And for me, it's a very exciting time to be in conversations with clients who are starting to think about it, and starting to become curious about its possibilities within their various contexts. So it's a great time to be talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, change is hard at the best of times, but it's inevitable. And yeah, I get that. It'll be painful for a time for a lot of us who are getting used to doing things differently. And but I always find that those who get in there and confront change are the ones who get ahead, and they get that over and done with. Tell me, my last question is, and I know you'd be under NDA, so appreciate that you can't mention names and things like that. But if you can, it'd be great to hear if there's anything you can share with your current clients around the idea of generative AI and its amazing capacity and almost limitless capacity, in the way it may be changing the way organizations view their business model. So I've had conversations with various business leaders, and one of the things that has come up with a few of them, more than a few of them, is that they are now looking to pivot potentially to a whole different model. And when you talk about this disruption, that is probably as disruptive as it gets, when you're talking about the foundations of a business model being challenged. Have you seen anything like that amongst your clients to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we have. We've got a very broad, we're very fortunate to work with a very broad spectrum of clients that range from, 130-year-old luxury brands through to 5-year-old law firms and everything else in between. And in the broad category of professional services, it's very much ripe for disruption because it's so knowledge and experience heavy, right? Think of a law firm. What's its most valuable asset, right? It's the stuff that exists between partners' ears, right? It's the intellectual property. It's the precedent library that exists, that's within their firewalls, right? That's their competitive advantage in most cases. We've got one client, to answer your question, we've got one client who concluded for himself that generative AI was essentially going to disrupt his model of business so much that it would, in some capacity, put him out of business. And it's a professional services organization that does advisory work, which is, of course, content heavy, right? It relies on vast amounts of information, knowledge, and experience. And with that vast amount of knowledge and experience, you generate reports, right? You generate reports, which is probably something that generative AI is very good at. And he realized that there was an opportunity. Instead of seeing that as a risk or a threat, he saw that as an opportunity to essentially transform his business from a traditional bricks and mortar and people consulting business to a digital and software as a service type business, whereby that knowledge and experience could be harnessed and captured through a small language model to deliver to deliver that expertise through software, and thereby creating a model where the expertise that was previously, I guess, deployed as a sort of time and materials consulting service is deployed as a software as a service to the same client set, but also it opens up a whole new segment that he couldn't previously service with his current capacity, right? With his current workforce, he couldn't service, companies of a certain size or certain sectors. But now that's all sort of fair play for him because of, I guess, digitally transforming his business such that there's a completely new revenue model through a generative AI product.
And just my last bit of that last question, did they discover that through the design thinking process, or was that something they had suspected? How did they come to that conclusion that they needed to pivot to more of a SaaS type model for their business?
Yeah, I don't believe there was sort of one sort of light bulb moment where it all occurred. However, I think it was through a series of touch points, and there was this sort of convergence of factors. And then during the design thinking workshop, it sort of revealed itself. It revealed itself to him that this has to change significantly, or the business that I've built over 30 years is going to be redundant. Is going to be made redundant. So it was I guess it was a revelation that was needing a number of factors to sort of compound to bring that to reveal itself to him. So it was, it happens. It happens in different ways for different people in different circumstances. But I think that was for me one of the most telltale signs that this technology is not going to go away. And this is just one example of potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of similar organizations that are in similar or identical situations, where they're reliant and heavily reliant on the knowledge of some key personnel, experience within a certain domain, and I guess a track record of delivering a certain thing with a discrete customer journey, as it were, that can essentially be patternized and used to train a language model to essentially replicate the human activity that takes place across the business.
Wow. Well, that kind of confirms what you were saying earlier, that sitting back and doing nothing is not really an option. And these guys, by the sounds of it, have already come to some critical conclusions about their business model ahead of time. Dave, thank you so much for the conversation today, mate. I've learned a lot already from the talk we've had. And for those businesses that are interested is this just for the big guys? Like, what about the small to medium enterprises? Can they get in on this too, or are they sort of being pushed out of that part of the conversation? What would be your advice if I'm a company with like 20 to 50 people? If I wanted to get in on this and work out what my future is as a business in this new era.
I guess a shameless plug alert here, but just get in touch. This is not technology that's relegated to the bigger end of town. Absolutely not. It's the power of Microsoft is that it's made it accessible to the masses, the small to medium, the mid-market enterprises. And for us as a business, as GPT Strategic, our goal is to help businesses find those use cases that'll deliver 5, 10, 20x in some cases return on investment. We're not in it to push product. We're not in it to just sell consulting hours. That's not our model. our model is to find meaningful and impactful use cases that can deliver that step change for your organization through generative AI. Otherwise, it's just bad business, right? So that is one of the really powerful and compelling factors of combining, for me, the match made in heaven that is OpenAI and Microsoft, right? An enterprise legend in the form of Microsoft and an upstart that is in the form of OpenAI that has built arguably the world's most powerful language model, right? Trained on the internet, right? And you combine those two things and make it at a price point that's accessible to all is pretty significant from a technology history point of view, right? So no, it is not relegated to the big end of town. Yeah, we've got clients that are 30 person sub 10 mil revenue turnover, and the ROI is equally powerful for them. Excuse me. Obviously, proportionately powerful for them as it is for the bigger end of town.
Fantastic. I mean, that's really exciting. It does remind me that I had read somewhere, and I'm paraphrasing, CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, talking about the great democratization that AI brings to the business world. So great to hear you believe that as well. So we'll make sure that we'll put some information in the notes for people to get in touch with you to even just have a discussion about what a next step might look like. Dave, thank you so much, mate. Chief Disruptor, GPT Strategic. Lovely to speak with you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Thanks for having me.